DeSanto Propane is 4 generations strong as a trustworthy family-owned business with unmatched customer service. Go online at DeSantoPropane.com for more info or call toll-free at 1-800-752-4574. Since 1937, the difference has been DeSanto Propane.
Hi, I'm Michael Ricci along with Garrett Clar, and welcome to another episode of the FL1 Sports Podcast here on FingerLakes1.com. And Garrett, we're previewing the sectional brackets today, and we're joined by producer Paul Russo as well, who's talking on the air as well with us. But, we have a little interesting perspective here. I've broadcasted every Victor home basketball game besides one, the McQuaid game, and you're obviously the player for the Blue Devils that I'll say leads the way. I know you don't want to say it yourself, and it'll be fun to talk about it. We got an interesting bracket with 16 teams in AA, and they've kind of switched up the sectional standings a bit. I know, Paul, you know a lot about that.
Yeah, so to kind of help balance everything out, AAA got reintroduced in a number of sports, basketball being one of them, so kind of seeing a shift across really the whole entire Section 5 of where teams usually are and where they aren't, and a couple teams in new places this year, a couple teams in familiar places this year in terms of sectional runs, so looking forward to talking about some brackets that I usually don't get to talk about all that often with you guys.
Yeah, so we're obviously looking at more like the Rochester teams that are involved in the AA, AAA brackets. But, Garrett, I'll ask you. We do the podcast together. We talk about it a lot. You guys are, the 7 seed this year? It's a little bit different than from where you were a year ago. And how do you feel going into the game?
Well, there's obviously a lot of things different about this bracket compared to next year. We're in the same classification this year, but with the new AAA class introduced, there's a lot of new teams sliding up from single A, and some of the bigger schools had gone from AA now into AAA, which is just a 7-team bracket. So I think the 16-team bracket is going to make for a lot of chaos and some upsets that were maybe unexpected.
Yeah, and there's also other teams in AAA that have been playing really well. Athena is one of them. Greece Athena, they've only lost, one game this year? They've been undefeated?
Undefeated.
Yeah, they've been undefeated. So they've been really good, and it's going to be interesting to watch. Fairport's also in that AAA now as well. So you guys had that rivalry with them in sectionals for felt like a couple of years now, and that's not going to be the case anymore this year. But, you obviously have the experience of going to states last year and winning it, and you obviously broke that sectional streak since 1978 of getting back there and actually winning it as well. But it's been a little bit different. It's been up and down. It's been an injury-plagued year for you guys at times. You've dealt with some injuries as well with the calf strain. I know you're kind of getting healthy at the right time. Cam Ryan's come back, who's a big player for you guys. Do you think that's going to help with the camaraderie coming down in sectionals, and you're like, we've been here before and we can do it again?
Yeah, I think our chemistry as a team has gotten better as we've gotten everyone back the last couple games. I know senior night was a lot of fun, especially for all of us seniors, just getting to play with each other. And it's a group of guys, we've played with each other our whole life, so just the opportunity to go on one more special run and try to duplicate what we did last year. Obviously, the Federation tournament taken away for teams who win states, but it's still the opportunity of a lifetime, and to be able to share it with the guys on the court and the coaching staff that's given us all these opportunities has been beyond special.
Yeah, so it should be fun to watch. It's always a great event at Blue Cross, too. I know you've been there before, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you see from a little bit of bird's eye view, a little far?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty unique because, for me, I was in your guys, well, not quite either your guys' shoes at your age, but,
Right.
I mean, I remember helping out with Minders on the, video side of things, so I got to get a little bit of a combo of, I'd say, behind-the-scenes / regular viewing, if you will, in a sense, because at the time they didn't allow video kind of up high. I was kind of in the middle, of the not quite the concourse, but, where the Bulls kind of divided up. So, but, I was able to kind of go through the locker room still and down below with everybody else. Right. And kind of transitioning now to being up in the press box area, it really puts it in a different perspective because, even, the 12 years ago now it's been, I thought it was a pretty big event at the time. And now that you're up high and you actually view it all, and it makes for a really great environment and atmosphere. I know the players involved, it's a big deal because, I know, a place, say, like Victor, for you guys, for example, you guys have really nice gyms, one of the nicer ones in the area for high school, period, no matter what. But for a lot of teams, they don't have the luxury of maybe playing quite as nice or big as gym. And so when you get to Blue Cross, and even for you guys, right, it still is a huge deal because, you get to go on to, it's still Les Robinson Court, I think, and everything. But, you're in the same locker rooms that the professionals are in, and you're out on the floor that professionals have played on. And it's just the atmosphere that, you come out on top, and if you win, it's just one of those things where it's like, it's the on top of the world feeling, right? Because, not everywhere is lucky to have the availability to play in a venue like Blue Cross Arena. Some places I know, I have friends from out of state who, they don't get that feel until they're in the state championship game, right? I know in Ohio, it's like, yeah, you play in semi-big venues, but it's like, not to dunk on whatever, but you're playing in like a D3 gym, a college D3 gym for it. And for a lot of kids, for a lot of people, that still can be a lot of the same stuff as like a high school gym. They don't get that until they go to like Columbus and they're playing in Value City or Nationwide Arena. For Section 5 and for everybody on the boys' side of things, it's a big deal that you get to play in Blue Cross Arena right away. And it's not lost on me when I broadcast, from my above that, the weight of the situation, the weight of the event, I want to let play out. And it's a little bit different, and not to go too much longer here, but, I take a lot of different examples of how I broadcast from different sports in general, whether it's basketball to baseball, to football, to, myself, motorsports. And, one of the things that every good broadcaster in every sport will say is you don't allow yourself to go on top of the gravity of the situation. So for me, once that final horn goes, like, I want to let the crowd kind of take over for a couple seconds and let that moment happen. And at Blue Cross Arena, it echoes. It allows that to have such a great space and a great atmosphere. Get a little bit of goosebumps even going on right now, kind of talking about it in a way, because you don't necessarily get that day in and day out for these games, but you get it at Blue Cross Arena.
Yeah, and I think Rochester does a really great job with that. You can also see it for the old Frontier Field. Now they have Innovative Field for the baseball sectional championship, and I think that's something kind of cool too. Garrett, we obviously had the opportunity to broadcast the Victor sectional final last year, just against Fairport. That was really fun to do. It was cool, and hopefully this year I'll be able to do some at Blue Cross, which would be fun.
Yeah.
But I know you've played there, and you've also broadcasted the one that we did at Innovative Field. That was really cool. Just, do you think that stadium and like the big name and like the big crowd, it just makes a difference when you feel and you can play a little bit better?
Yeah, I think it certainly just adds to just the moment and how special it is. Even with basketball now, I know a couple of years ago they used to put the semifinals in Blue Cross Arena as well. So they've gone back to the format of just putting the finals, so it's even harder to get there. So it means even more. And just the little things, you walk out on the court, and it was probably the greatest traction I've ever had with my shoes.
Yeah.
Just the little stuff like that you just take for granted when you're in your own gym. You just get used to it, and all of a sudden you get put out there, and it's a little colder because you're playing where there's ice underneath the court. So it's just little stuff like that, and the nostalgia. And even though it's packed in, it hardly looks full if you take in, the whole scenery, just because of how big the arena is. And it's just such a cool experience overall. No one's logo's on the midcourt. It's really just plain and basic, because everyone's playing on it, but it's just such a cool experience.
Yeah, and it really lives up to the hype. I think it's cool. We could look at some of the brackets now, Paul, if you want to put those up there.
Yeah, I'll put AAA boys up here first for you guys. I know you mentioned that a little bit up front.
Yeah, so AAA, you guys don't really cover a bunch of these teams.
No, not particularly. For us, a couple of those teams will come up on the radar every now and then when, say, like a Wayne or a Palmac or Newark kind of plays them in non-league. But for the most part, not a ton of stuff on these guys.
Yeah, so Fairport with the 2 seed, they're going to have to play McQuaid the first round. That's a game that I look at, Garrett. Fairport should easily have that one. It's been a down year for McQuaid. I'm not that high on them. I don't know how you feel about them. You've played both of these teams. What do you think?
Both of these teams are not teams you want to see in the first round of sectionals just because of the way they play. They're so fundamentally sound. They're great with the ball. They don't turn it over a lot. And these two coaches, Scott Fitch and Jack Leisure, are two of the best in Section 5. They always have their guys ready to play. I know we played McQuaid in the first round of sectionals last year, and I don't know how the rest of my teammates felt, but
it wasn't easy.
It was
no.
certainly not easy to squeak past them. And AAA this year is made up of 2 private schools with Aquinas and McQuaid, 3 city schools, and then 2 Monroe County teams, which we're actually in the same league in. So sort of a mixture of everything. But Fairport just missed the 1 seed by a game, which Aquinas was able to. Aquinas was undefeated for a while, and then they sort of limped into the rest of the season. But they are the 1 seed who gets that coveted bye, and now they're already in the semifinals.
Right, and because there's not a lot of teams in there, it just makes a trip to the finals really easy. Like you said, they're already in the semis. You win 1 game and you're in. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how this works out for the Section 5 because they're trying to break it up and they're trying to change it up. But like you said, Garrett, it's a weird mixture of teams. It's not like an exact formula. They just kind of decided to put these teams together. There's city schools or private schools. There's league schools that are with Victor. So it's a little weird of a mixture.
Yeah, and, it's kind of like the perfect little bracket to look at with that because, I mean, the way they do the private schools, too, obviously it's from the state level. They all I don't know what the equation is exactly, and I don't really know if I want to know what the equation is exactly because – I mean, and look, every private school is different, right, with admittance and stuff like that. But, it's kind of crazy that a team, and I don't mean to pick anyone in particular out on this one, but you look at Aquinas, they're in AAA, and then you have, like, a team like North Star Christian who's, I think, like, in C2 or someone like that. It's like, it leaves head scratching in that sense. But
I think everyone feels that way when they pick these brackets.
Yeah, but looking at this, at least in my experience with kind of dealing with at least a few of these teams, Aquinas has always been a tough out. I remember, we played them back in high school when I was in school, and we hung with them for a while, but they ended up pulling away, and it kind of seems like they're always at least some sort of competitive. I don't know if that's still the case, but clearly this year it is if they got the lone quote-unquote bye in this scenario with AAA.
I think that Rush Henrietta could kind of shake up the bracket a little bit at that 5 spot. Victor just played them, and I broadcasted that game, and you guys beat them pretty good. But this is a Rush team that won 5 straight going into that game. They're very young. They have a very good player in Jalen Taggart, who's a sophomore for them, and he had a dunk in that game as well. So he's an athletic freak. He's a stud. He can really do a lot. I think this is a young team that gets better in the upcoming years, but I think this year they could be like one of those teams where you look at them and say, oh, they exceeded expectations early, and then in the upcoming years, a year or two later, they'll be like, okay, they're cemented now. I think they're a young team that has a lot of potential.
Yeah, and Paul touched on it earlier, mentioning schools like North Star Christian and then Aquinas and McQuaid, but in other sections like Buffalo, private schools can't even participate.
Yeah.
It's strictly public schools, so these teams wouldn't even be in the bracket. They would have to – there's usually like a private patriarchal league or something that they would make their way up through. So something that's unique to Section 5.
There used to be in Section 5. I don't know what happened with it, but I know in the past couple of years it's kind of strayed away. But, the beauty about those teams, though, go back to Rush for a second, the quote-unquote younger teams, those are some of the tougher teams to face because they don't know any better, and that's the thing. Like,
and they're playing with house money.
Right, exactly. I mean, what do they have to lose? They know that they'll be kind of running it back with the same group next year, and so they can be tough outs. And if you're talking the way they are anyway, I'd imagine that UPrep might be in for a rough awakening on that game anyway.
Yeah, that'll be a really interesting game. I think the best game of the first round. Just there's a lot of talent in that game. Both teams very young as well, so teams that'll be competitive in the future as well.
So let's look at the AA bracket now. We'll pull that on up there. And this is where things get interesting. 16 teams. And there's a lot to unfold. There's a lot of teams in here. Garrett, you see yourself sitting at the 7th spot of the game on Wednesday this upcoming week. But Greece Athena at the top, undefeated. They're the team that they haven't scheduled everybody super tough. They didn't want to play against you guys this year, so that's another thing. You don't know fully about Greece Athena. And then Hilton at 2, a team that you guys lost to on the road but beat at home. And they're a good basketball team, but you look at this bracket and there's a lot of things that could happen, and it might not be your 1 and 2, in my opinion, at the end of it.
Yeah, I think there's going to be just a lot of chaos. This is the first time that we've had really 16 team brackets in Section 5, trying to split, just distribute the lower classes by adding a AAA. And both Class A and Class AA have 16 team brackets where the whole season, you've just been seeing yourself getting bounced around from seed to seed. You're at the 1 or 2 spot, all of a sudden you lose a couple of games and you find yourself down at the 5 or 6. So it'll be definitely interesting just to see, who can play their best for 4 games. Is a lot of times, you get that 1 or 2 seed, you're in the semifinals in AAA this year, but a lot of times it was the quarters, and now every team's going to have to win 4 games.
Yeah, so in this bracket format, when you look at the top and you see Greece Athena there, and you look at the bottom of that top part of the bracket and you see Penfield versus Gates Chili first game. In my opinion, Garrett, I see in that semifinal Penfield versus Greece Athena. That's what I think is going to be a really good game. Penfield's a team that, they can shoot the lights out with Trevor Hofer and Christian Zarzicki. Those are 2 kids that have played really good. And, watching them and broadcasting a couple of their games, or one of their games, and then going to the other one that you guys played on the way, they're a dangerous team, and I think they could possibly knock off the 1 seed if they were to put up a really good shooting night. So I don't think it's going to be exactly chalk in this bracket, as I'll say, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, chime in quickly. You mentioned Athena maybe not playing a strength of schedule all that great, but yeah, it's one of those things where, at least when I look at stuff like that, I always think I'd rather have the tougher schedule in the regular season to get ready for sectional time in that sense. Yeah, the way you're talking, I'll take your word for it to be there for the semis, but I don't know. I mean, I know Menden's played a couple Finger Lakes East teams this year in the 9 slot, so I've seen them a little bit. So I don't know how great maybe they'll go up against hypothetically if they meet Greece Athena in that quarterfinal, but in the hypothetical sense. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I feel like I'd rather have that tougher schedule get me prepped, so that gets me kind of excited that you think. I
think Penfield's going to put up a fight.
You think it'll be a little bit of a shakeup there?
No, yeah, I think it'll be really fun at the top part of that bracket, and even in the bottom part, you see Hilton at the top of it, and they're playing against Greece Arcadia the first game, and then it's you guys and Victor playing against Webster Thomas the first game, and then Canandaigua, Brockport, and Irondequoit, Spencerport. I look at that, Garrett, and I see you guys versus Webster Thomas. I know Victor basketball is next play mentality. They're not even focusing on anything else besides this game coming up on Wednesday. But I do have to ask you, if you play against Hilton in the second round, I know your answer is going to be we're just focused on against Webster Thomas, but it's going to be on the road, and you lost to them on the road. Do you think there's a big home environment that goes in their favor when you play there? Is there something different? What's the big drop-off from when you guys played earlier in the season?
We're not really going to focus on that
There
too
it
much
is.
right now.
But you can give me an answer of how was it like playing there earlier in the season on the road?
It's a different place to play, especially if you look at the Monroe County division. They're just so much farther than a lot of the other schools we play. So just the size of Hilton and their location, they're not really near, the Victors, the Penfields, the Fairports. So they're certainly out there a bit, but things will fall in place, and we'll see how it all ends up.
And, that's a big disadvantage that some people think of for Hill, and they have to travel a ton during the regular season, but they put themselves in a great position at the 2 seed. Teams are going to have to come to them. Yeah. And, that's a big thing for the first 2 games at least, and they play Gates Chili if they make it that far. But that's the interesting part. And then Canandaigua with the 3 seed, just a little surprising to me. I don't think they're the strongest team in this bracket. I don't think that they're going to necessarily make it too far in here. I think they're going to be at least knocked out in the semis. I don't see them in the championship game. That's just from what I've seen from them this year.
Yeah, I'll let Paul touch on this a little more. I know he's covered. Him and Jim Sincroby have both covered some of their games.
Yeah, we've taken a look at them a little bit. It's interesting because obviously it kind of goes to that like Hilton element to a degree, right? You don't luck into, say, those high seeds. I guess at that point, Athena too to that degree. But, yeah, I mean, even talking with you guys a little bit, kind of makes you wonder. And, look, there are always teams like that every year, no matter what class, no matter what bracket, where you kind of just, like, sit there and go, like, they're in that spot, how'd they get there, or vice versa. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Canandaigua, for me, has always just been one of those tough teams that kind of, not so much gauge, but you kind of know what you're going to get into every time with them.
Yep.
And so, in that sense, it's always easier maybe to kind of predict outright. Admittedly, I don't know maybe enough about Brockport or, say, the other teams there at the bottom of the bracket, in that portion of it anyway, to maybe make an outright prediction on, how far they'll get or not. Certainly, though, I could see them no problem in semifinals at the very least.
Yeah.
Are they officially going as the Grey Wolves now? I think they are.
Yes,
right?
they are.
So,
The Grey Wolves.
The Grey Wolves, I can see hopefully at least getting that far. I mean, for me, it's a little bit maybe easier than, say, Garrett in your situation, especially maybe predicting otherwise. But, ideally, I'd love nothing more than say have Victor Canandaigua as a semifinal matchup in that sense. You know what I mean? So
It's the old school. It's the old school rivalry you got. But I got to ask you, Paul.
Yeah.
You haven't broadcasted Victor games this year.
No.
And so you're obviously you're the outside looking in when you look at this bracket. What have you seen from Victor? I know, and I don't want to hear a biased answer just because he's in the studio with us today.
Well, I know we're looking ahead to the next game as well on our end. So,
Yeah.
no. Look, it's always tough to follow up a state championship run. I mean, even here hyper locally, look at Waterloo girls.
They were phenomenal last year.
They run through, they win states and fed, and, did this year live up to the expectation that they had? Maybe not necessarily, but they find themselves in a really good spot and be, in my opinion, in their sectional bracket as well. And I'm sure, Garrett, in your situation, you can probably attest this a little bit. Have things maybe gone the exact way you'd hope this year? Maybe not in the grand scheme of it, right? But, look, you have one home game initially here off the bat in sectionals. And that can make, I say this all the time, it can make a world of difference, especially towards the tail end of this year broadcasting-wise. The home crowds got into games this year in a way that I don't think I've seen the past couple of years. So I think that could make a difference. I mean, the interesting part with you guys is you guys have been playing together still, your group here for a little bit. So, and it goes back to maybe what I said a little bit in essence in regards to scheduling and stuff like that. If you're able to play together as a unit, you know what you can do as a team, and you can feed off each other's positives and negatives, you can kind of throw some of that stuff out the window. You know what I mean? So, and, you kind of talked a little bit off air about it too, kind of looking at the bracket. I mean, you're finding you guys and Victor have found yourselves against opponents here early on in theory and sectional play, as long as you keep going with that mentality of every, next game up and not looking ahead. You know what you have to face, and you know what you're seeing, and that can be a big check mark in the homework department that you don't have to worry about. So, the Blue Devils, for you guys, I don't worry necessarily maybe in that regard, or I don't weigh too much what I saw in the regular season as much, because I know it's a different mentality for you guys come this time of year.
I think it's a great point, Paul, because you look at Hilton at the 2 seed. If they win their first game against Greece Arcadia, I think, and if Victor beats Webster Thomas, they're looking at that matchup and they're going, could we get a worse draw? I don't think they're liking that matchup. You talk about teams that are dangerous to play and teams you don't want to play in sectionals. I would definitely not want to be the team that faces off against the Blue Devils in the second round. The team that won states last year, the team that has that core group like you mentioned,
right,
and a team that's getting healthy at the right time.
Yeah.
That's the thing. When you were touching on it with, does it really matter all too much what happens in the regular season? They were injured. They were unhealthy. They had some late games where they just had bad management with players at the ball and made some big mistakes and big turnovers. If you clean all that up, that's when this team gets really dangerous, and I think that could really shake up this bracket a lot, where you see a 7 seed in a spot where you didn't really expect it if you're just drawing chalk.
I mean, we've seen enough, too, where across whether it's high school or college or whatever, 7 seeds tend to be one of those quote-unquote, they aren't even truly second half seed, right? But that mid-tier seed that, can kind of just cause enough chaos anyway that, you have to throw away your bracket anyway.
Yeah.
So what a better spot to be in than playing hypothetically spoiler in that situation then.
Yeah, I think AA is a real interesting bracket with the 16 teams this year, and it'll be cool to see. And we'll want to look at single A now?
Yeah.
All right.
Chuck over there.
So single A, this is more that you know about.
Yeah.
So I'll have you start it off with single A.
Yeah, so for us, obviously with Wayne, Newark, Geneva, and Palmac all in our direct coverage area. So we've seen a lot of them all year and kind of know what to expect from them, but I'm pretty sure A gets headlined, and justifiably so, by East this year. I wouldn't say they run the gauntlet in that sense, but in terms of A, and you even talk to the coaches here in the Finger Lakes East and A, East is pretty much at the forefront of the mind. So kind of look at that. And, another 16-team bracket here that it's pretty deep, in my opinion. It's going to be, I'd say, tough to maybe draw an exact winner from this. I would say East obviously would probably have the hypothetical betting favorite in this situation. But, for me personally, I really like Wayne in this, in the bottom half of the bracket. They've been in A consistently now, the other teams in the East. Newark and Geneva have been A's in the past, but it's been a number of years since they've been in A. This is Palmac's first foray into A for basketball, so I don't know what to kind of expect fully from them. I like Newark's chances as well, kind of in the top. I think they could kind of maybe cause a shakeup or two in the top half of the bracket. They got a really good kind of three-pack of players with the Allen brothers and Kellen Foster. Their main issue is they kind of play a level of the opponent every now and then. So, look, they've gone out, they've beaten A's and they've lost A's this year. I don't know what to fully expect from them maybe in that sense, but I kind of like the fact that they have a pretty favorable matchup. They play Soda there at the jump, so I like them. And obviously Wayne will have the de facto home court advantage on the bottom half of the bracket, but Geneva's played them, in the regular season, their 2 games in defensive battles. We were there for the one. It was a 44-28 win for Wayne in Geneva. And then last week, Wayne won on their home court 39-34. So Geneva's played them tough. I mean, that's a Geneva team that when they're going, they are a really good team. Coach Ed Collins on there has got them going in the right direction. Palmac, it's a tough draw for them. I know they got Eastridge at the jump. Offensively, they struggle at times, but that's a really good defensive team in Palmac. They will throw, and I'm not kidding when I say this, every possession's a different defensive scheme. Not many basketball teams that I've covered have done that consistently.
Right.
So they could play spoiler. I could very well see Palmac getting into the quarterfinal. I wouldn't be surprised there. I wouldn't be surprised if any of the Finger Lakes East teams, if they all advanced in that sense. I'll probably toss it back to you guys here at this point because I know, for example, like Batavia, I know they're way out, but they're Monroe County, but I know that's a bit of a down year for what they've had this year. Like I said, I know we've talked East a little bit here, but I look at the bracket, Bishop Kearney, another private school, for example, don't know fully what to expect out of them because, again, we talked about you have AAA, C's, down A's, who knows what they're, so.
They've been good in years past.
Yeah.
This year, not so much.
A's a pretty, to me, good kind of mix of, those the middle tier schools with those higher population schools kind of in the middle.
Yeah. The top 4 seeds in the A bracket this year are the top 4 who were in the semis last year. It was Sutherland playing Monroe, and then East took down Wayne. Wayne's the 2 seed now. I expect them to get through and probably play Sutherland again. I don't think those two have faced off this year. Newark-Monroe would be an interesting game if those 2 teams are able to take care of business in the first round. I think Kearney could give East a pretty good game. Kearney's a team whose schedule is a pretty tough schedule. They play a couple AAA teams, a lot of AA teams. They play all over Rochester pretty much. But I think it's going to be a heavy dose of the same thing last year where Sutherland took down East in the final. I think we could even see those same 2 teams in the final again this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. I know I hypothesized this earlier this morning. Kind of makes you wonder if you flop Monroe and Newark seed-wise, how that quarterfinal matchup would actually shape out, because I think home court in that matchup, should they both obviously get there, I think that's going to be a huge factor. I really do. It'll be tough. I mean, Newark might have the tougher road only because of, they got nobody that they're really accustomed to in that sense that they're going up against necessarily. It kind of makes for a tougher road when you don't necessarily know what you got. But, and I said this also earlier too, you kind of have to throw a little bit of that out the window now with the way Huddle is and stuff like that. You can see pretty much anybody at any given time.
But I think it's also important, and it touches on what we said earlier in the show, where who you schedule really matters.
Yeah.
Newark hasn't really faced the teams like you're saying that Monroe has.
But their non-league was tough. I mean, they were kind of swinging at some bigger schools in their non-league.
Right.
So
that's where it can help you down in sectionals.
Right.
I think that's the main point that we're trying to make. Where if you're looking at a team to try to be that dark horse candidate and it's a lower seed, look who they've played and look how close games have been and what have they taken away from those wins or losses.
Yeah, Michael, we've had the pleasure as well of calling some girls games from Victor this year. If you want to put up the girls AA bracket, the girls team winning the league at 19-1 for the first time, and I think it was 30, 35, 40 years. So
was that by?
Testament to them. Coach Ashley Zahn, winning Coach of the Year for Class AA. Great accomplishment for her and Victor. Ryland Fehrenbach, Player of the Year in their Monroe County division. So it's been a ton of bright spots for Victor this year, who hasn't been the 1 seed in that AA bracket in a while, but it's still a really deep team, and you can't just not look at Webster Schrader in the 5 spot, the defending state champion.
Yeah, it's a great spot
runs
for them.
The same team back. Victor has to be looking at that and realize, man, we got to play them before, just for even a chance to get to the finals. Got to be a little bit, disheartening to see.
It's not the luckiest draw, Garrett. I think that's what you're trying to say, and that makes sense because It was a really close game that we watched and we broadcasted. And you also see Canandaigua, who's the 4 seed, and it was not a close game. Victor smoked them, run them out of the gym. It was the Scott Zahn Memorial Night, so a little bit of connection and family ties for Coach Ashley Zahn, as her father who passed away. It was a memorial night for him, and they've been doing that for a few years now. Really a great event. And we were there to broadcast both of the games. I broadcasted both of the games. He played in the other one. And it was just,
Wait,
I don't know if,
you mean to tell me Garrett wasn't mic'd up?
I wish, that'd be kind of cool. But when you watch it, it just looked like Victor was on another level than Canandaigua. They couldn't hit down their threes, or they couldn't make their jump shots, and it was really tough for them. And the defense and the rebounding that you see from the Blue Devils is all from Rylan Fehrenbach. She's the best player on this team. She works in the paint. She's fast, athletic, efficient. Everything that you kind of want in a play, like a 4 or a 5, she does that, and she fights. So she's not some girl that you're just going to be able to run right through or create contact with, and then she's going to phase out. She kind of lives for that, and that's what we've seen when broadcasting Victor girls games this year. And I think there might be a little bit of chalk in this one if I think the Blue Devils are going to find themselves in the championship game, but that Webster-Schrader matchup is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and looking at the bottom of the bracket, Victor's one loss was to Hilton in the second game that we called, and Victor was really close.
Yeah.
Mallory Heiss and Ella Clark, 2 studs for Hilton. But Penfield did beat Hilton earlier this year in Penfield. Assuming those teams both win, that game would be in Hilton. I think Hilton would be able to take care of Pittsford Mendon or Penfield, whoever gets through. So I think either the winner of Hilton Penfield is probably going to be in the championship. But for Victor to win, it looks like they're going to have to go through Schrader and Hilton, which would be just a testament to them again. Is that would be their 3rd win over Schrader and their 2nd win over Hilton.
It wouldn't be an easy run by any stretch.
No, they certainly have what is a tough draw. Obviously, they get the bye to the quarterfinal, but they definitely deserve that. Paul, I don't know if you following girls AA too much this year.
It's pretty interesting because Mendon did play Paul Mac, and Paul Mac beat them. So I don't know. I mean, that's a good Paul Mac team on the girls' side of things in A. I think my main question, though, is I know Kearney's had quite the run themselves, but did they lose a couple players from
prep school?
Okay, gotcha. So, yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to agree with you guys on that one then. I mean, it kind of seems maybe a bit chalky then at that point, but you never know. You have to take them as they come.
The one concern I have for Victor, they become a little bit one-player dependent sometimes. If Rylan Fehrenbach isn't on her A game and plays a great game against a Schrader, against a Hilton, against a Penfield, you might see a little bit of issues go on with them because if she has an off night and the shots don't go down from the other key players, I'd say, but they're not like super key players, they're just kind of role players on the team. If they can't hit their shots when they're open, it's going to be tough for them, and that's what we've seen when they've lost. So that's the one important thing to note. But she's been terrific all year. So it's like when you have a star, it doesn't. When is she going to be off?
Right.
We don't know. Maybe the lights will get to her. This is her first year playing, so we'll see. But she's been terrific. This team has been terrific, and it's nice to see that they got the bye in the first round. They deserved it. 100%.
I mean, it's good. It's just good to see them really play well. I mean, that's one of the things that in my time now here full time at FL1, we haven't really seen that too much out of the Victor on the girls side of things. So to see them up top, it really makes it great. I mean, I'm sure exceeding probably some sort of expectation, though, it being the number 1 overall seed and stuff like that, and getting the bye and
they won
being able to watch from afar these first couple of days is probably nice.
I believe they won the league for the first time since the 80s. Is it 82 or it's around there? It's been a long time, and after the boys team was able to make history a year before, it's nice to see, and it's been fun to watch and broadcast the games, and I think we got a great sectional bracket coming up.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of this time of year, right, is no matter what, in theory, you're probably getting a good game, no matter what, in that sense, from the broadcasting side of it. Obviously, playing-wise, these are the moments you kind of live for, in a sense, up to this point. So, yeah, I mean, we call it, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but for us, we call it the second season. It's pretty much, we don't do it too much here in the opening round of sorts. We kind of wait for the quarterfinals to kind of get going. That's where usually you get the, unfortunately, better matchups, if you will, only because of the way sometimes these opening pre-quarters kind of get going. But, we call it the second season. It's a lot of games in a short amount of time, and can't beat it. It's our own version of March Madness. I don't know, February fever to call it or something like that, but you can't beat it around here this time of year.
Yeah, Garrett, it should be fun. You want any last word about how you guys feel going into sectionals or what you feel about this bracket?
Now we're just taking it one day at a time, and it's a lot like
This is the chalk answer I get every time I ask one of them or interview one of these players.
It's called diplomatic.
like Paul said, it's the high school's version of March Madness, and there's a reason we play March Madness every year. It's not the 4-1 seeds at the end.
And I think there's a real case. If you want to do a bracket, I don't know how many perfect brackets somebody could get. I don't think it's really possible if you're trying to do that in any one of these things. But should be fun.
No.
It was a good episode, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate
well,
it.
thanks for having us. That's the
Wow.
real thing.
It's a nice combo when we were able to do this.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this edition of the FL1 Sports Podcast here on FingerLakes1.com. For all our latest headlines and local content, check out the FingerLakes1.com local network. And if you ever need to listen to your favorite podcast online, download the Finger Lakes One podcast. And on behalf of Garrett and myself, we thank you, Paul and Jim Sinacropi, for allowing us to come in here today. It's always a pleasure. It's always fun. Nice to talk about some high school basketball. And, yeah, follow the CR Sports Podcast on YouTube, Twitter, or X, and Instagram. And thanks for joining us, everybody. Check us out next time.
Finger Lakes One.